We're going to continue our work for Education 323 by still focusing on Chapter 6 Phonics. There's an important component in phonics instruction, and that is providing many opportunities for students to read the words that they have just learned about the concept for decoding in texts. And so, welcome to Chapter 6, Phonics, Part 2, Decodable Texts. Our essential question, how can decodable books support the work of phonics instruction, is about to be answered. So what do you know about selecting texts for emergent readers? Please open up the KWLA in Blackboard and begin with a brain dump. What do you know about decodable texts and other types of books? And then please frame questions, thinking about levels 1, 2, and 3. What questions are level 1? How and why questions are levels 2 and 3? What do you want to know about decodable texts and selecting the right text for your students? Please frame questions in the second column. And after that is completed, then you can resume this lecture and do your reading to then complete the last 2 columns at the end of your learning or while you're learning. How can teachers find the right texts for beginning readers? I would like for you to begin by either reading or rereading the Chapter 6 Phonics Decodable Text, pages 183, and then also the method for reading decodable texts, pages 235 to 239, and then choosing the right text, page 367, 368. I realize that these chapters are outside of Chapter 6, but all of these topics relate to decodable texts, and that is our focus for the second week, part 2 of our phonics instruction. We've already talked about the KWLA, and so with that, I would just like to recognize that our textbook, Teaching Reading Sourcebook, is a wonderful resource, and we're using that for the majority of our learning. The majority of this lecture, however, is a springboard of what I've learned from reading Shifting the Balance. And so I want to thank our authors, Jan Berkins and Carrie Yates, for presenting information about text selection in Shift 6 of their book, Shifting the Balance, 6 Ways to Bring the Science of Reading into the Classroom. I know that we've utilized, leaned on, and talked about this book previously. There are many, many resources that are connected to this book, and I highly encourage you to purchase this book and lean on it if you're currently working in a district that is still utilizing guided reading, leveled books, and balanced literacy approach, because it is time for us to make the shift. How can teachers find the right text for beginning readers? Before we can move on, we really do need to bring us back to the why. And the why is built in our explicit phonics lesson planning. There is a template for phonics lesson planning in Shifting the Balance. And then our textbook, Sourcebook, page 175, also lists 6 components for phonics instruction. And number 5 is apply to decodable text. Again, I can't reiterate how important it is for students to not only have explicit, systematic, and cumulative phonics instruction, but to then also be able to apply what they're learning with words that they can decode in text that they can practice. It is through that process that they will move those words to long-term memory and map them permanently in their brain. And that is what we're going to look at as we talk about various textbooks for reading instruction. There are actually 4 kinds of text for beginning readers. There are high frequency texts, and these emphasize high frequency words. We will be talking about decoding in the next couple of weeks, and we will be looking at what the difference between sight words and high frequency words really are. But one type of text really utilizes the high frequency words. Moving to the lower left corner are level texts. These are texts that are ranked on a scale according to the book, print features, content, theme, or ideas, text structure, and or literary elements. These books are often leveled A through Z, and we'll talk a little bit more about those as we move on. Predictable texts employ repeated language patterns, and it makes the text more memorable and enjoyable. And these are the texts students are often able to, quote, read, unquote, with you. So I would like you to think about a predictable text. I know that Cat in the Hat is a text that my children were able to read at a very early age. And then we come to the final of the 4, which is the decodable text. Decodable text uses phonics pattern words with sound symbol correspondence. They reinforce the skills that have been taught, they review skills that have been learned, and they provide a practice opportunity for students to feel success, to really move from left to right, keep their eyes on the words, and really give a sound to each and every symbol. It is important to know that decodable texts are an integral part of the systematic and explicit phonics instruction. It is the tool for application. It is the bridge for acquiring phonics knowledge and moving to successful reading of authentic literature. So why? Why decodable texts? What are they? When should we use them? So decodable texts are simple books that contain grapheme-phoneme correspondence that students have already learned. They provide learners with opportunities to use, or like I said in the previous slide, apply the skills they've learned. It moves the learning from skill to automaticity. It allows students to experience independent reading success. They aren't feeling frustrated. They aren't guessing. They aren't looking at the teacher or the pictures, but really focusing on the words. Students in kindergarten through 2nd grade should have exposure to decodable text. Now, let's really talk about this. Decodable texts are limited in words that can be used. Beginning decodables are simple, and they move to more complex as the student learns more skills and words. But they are limited in vocabulary. These texts are not rich language opportunities. Therefore, comprehension must be taught with other texts. This is the role the teacher plays to really experience read-alouds and shared reading and other rich opportunities. But decodable texts are part of the phonics lesson plan and provide additional opportunities for students to practice. The search for quality decodable texts is worth the effort because of the important role they play in learning to read. Early reading needs to move from bumpy start, stop to a helpful mix of words for orthographic learning. When selecting texts for beginning readers, there are 3 tensions that Jan and Carrie talked about. One is the tension between decodability and predictability. One is between novelty and repetition. and the third is between orthographic value and sense-making value. Let's look at these three tensions when you're looking at this page of text. A pup can run. A pup can jump. The pup can run and jump. So the decodability is really looking at how regular are the words in the text. And sometimes decodable books use sob instead of a more common word like cry, so that it can be decoded. And then the predictability is, do the pattern and or illustrations make the words easy to predict? Because if they do, we really want to take that away and allow students to put their eyes on the grapheme-phoneme correlation. When we're thinking about novelty, we would ask, will children encounter new words built from familiar sound spellings? Or are the words in the spelling patterns repeated so that the student will just be able to predict what's next and not allow for authentic practice? And then the orthographic value is really how aligned is the text to the reader's current phonics knowledge or learning. And the sense-making value is, does the story make sense? Does the text engage the reader in thinking? And sometimes it's hard to find a book with everything. But the real focus is that we want decodable texts in the hands of children so that they can practice their phonics skills while still presenting other authentic texts and reading experiences in the whole group read-alouds, shared readings, and so on for that top part of Scarborough's rope. Predictable texts can actually make learning to read complex texts more challenging. Predictable texts actually help children feel confident, but not using the words and the letter patterns to decode is problematic. We have gotten a false sense of success by using predictable and leveled texts because the students are not orthographically mapping and they are not finding that grapheme-phoneme connection to really do the hard work of decoding. And so they often memorize the text, and then when it comes time to orthographically map, the child has to slow down, look closely, and move through the word. And if orthographic mapping is skipped, then it becomes problematic, especially in the later grades where the pictures are less and the words are bigger and they aren't able to orthographically map or decode some of the multisyllabic words. So even if it makes children sound less skilled for a while, it is so important to provide opportunities for orthographic learning. In fact, this quote from our Shifting the Balance book, page 143 says, "Maximizing orthographic learning opportunities from the very start requires texts, decodable texts that will give children reasons to slow down and to look closely at print." We've talked a lot about Erie, and this is a powerful graphic that demonstrates how text matches phases. And if you look at the number 1, you see that it's a high level of ease. It looks easy, and it's the pre-alphabetic phase. And I'm thinking about a little 2-year-old friend that could read a book because it was memorized, and they were feeling great about reading. And then there's the partial alphabetic phase where they're starting to see that these words and these letters are combining. And then you move into the full alphabetic phase. And that is just simply hard work. And my little first grade niece is in that stage, a full alphabetic phase. and she's trying to learn how to read. And she has to have decodable text, so she feels high levels of frustration. And she still loves it when her mom reads Harry Potter to her. So she's getting that authentic literature that's rich, and she's looking at comprehension and developing vocabulary. But for her to become a reader and break the code and truly read, she has to work very hard with phonics decodable texts and needs to have and use that progression of development from beginning reading to move all of those words to automaticity so that she can peel the words off the page and move to that consolidated phase and eventually the automatic phase where automaticity kicks in. Using meaning as the go-to source of information actually interferes with comprehension at the more complex levels. So I want you to think about this. It's kind of repeating what I've said, but maybe saying it differently, and maybe it'll click with you. So remember that learning to read is not natural. Readers need to do the hard work of mapping. So there's automaticity and they can retrieve the word later. Reading comprehension, which remember is the outcome of Scarborough's rope and the simple view of reading, truly piggybacks on listening comprehension. So we have to have a rich vocabulary and exposure to lots of literature, but decoding is imperative. And if we don't understand the value and the importance of teaching phonics to all students in a systematic approach, there's something really major lost. And that is what has happened over the last decades with balanced literacy. Looking at pictures for clues is a short-term quick fix that builds a false sense of confidence. So it's not enough to just get books in the hands of readers. We must be intentional and purposeful. Although we wish to make all readers independent readers, it is so much more important to match their skill development to the texts, because students must read all of the words. If they're looking at you while they're reading, please direct them to look at the page and the words. If they're looking at the pictures when they're stuck, again, tell them the clue is in the word. Think about the sounds they can decode. Students must have chances to prove and practice their phonics instruction. So, neither predictable or decodable beginning reading books are great texts for teaching comprehension. That is a reality, an unfortunate but real point. So, high volume reading from texts matched to children's developing print strengthens the neural networks, makes reading increasingly automatic. And so that once those words are orthographically mapped, then they can read authentic text and they can work on comprehension skills. So orthographic learning is a helpful mix of words aligned to phonics, and the effort is spent trying to decode. An unhelpful mix of words means the students spend effort trying to decode, but they're orthographically frustrated. So we want to provide decodable texts for students, knowing this isn't the richest book for teaching comprehension. So again, what is the goal or the main purpose of code-based reading instruction? It is a component in phonics instruction. It is a support for beginning readers because it builds a solid word recognition skill and orthographically maps. I think of these books like riding a bike. It is like the training wheels. It controls the text, gives them words, makes them feel successful while still allowing balance. Or better than training wheels, how many of your children or you've seen nieces and nephews use books with no pedals and they have to use their own feet to power the bike and find balance? That is what reading is all about. The type of text and how it is used must focus on both sides of the rope. So we must use a variety of texts. You can see Scarborough's rope. The top part is listening language development. Have conversations, promote oral talking and discussion, but also use decodable texts to support phonics. So we've already gone through this slide, and I won't go through it again, but please remember, I'll never say that decodable texts are enough. They are not rich in language opportunities. Therefore, comprehension must be taught with other texts. So, what type of text is this? Take a moment to look at it. Look at the moon high up in the night sky, said Mike. It shines so bright tonight. What a sight, said Ty. The light shines right into our room. Would you like to go on a flight to the moon? Said Mike. I'd fly there. Why not? Said Ty. Mike let out a sigh. It is so far, he said, but someday we might try. Right, sighed Ty. Good night. He pulled the cover tight and turned out the light. What skill is being practiced? What are the skills that you can predict have been taught by looking at the text? Think. Answer. First of all, this is decodable text. And second of all, the skills that are identified, obviously, the IGH, the long I, the short I, this Y sounding like I. This is a decodable text with a strong focus on I and the various spellings. All right. Decodable texts, again, are an integral part of phonics instruction. So there are many resources for finding decodable text. Some must be purchased, some are free, but it's time for you to check those out, especially if you're already teaching, to make sure that your students have the books they need if you're teaching phonics. And if there are lots and lots of leveled readers in your school, I have an idea of what to do with them. So predictable texts is the next kind of text that we'll talk about. And this is a text with a repetitive sentence structure. So often these include, they rely on the 3 cueing systems, which is the MSV, which is highly criticized for allowing students to use pictures for guessing, and not at all an explicit, systematic, or cumulative approach for teaching reading. The predictable text requires students to draw on their background knowledge, so they often have to know a little bit about the subject or the content of the book, and the students are encouraged to guess or predict what the word might be. When children read predictable text, they often have a false sense of success. They lack opportunities for orthographic mapping, and so the words are not moved to the long-term memory, and there's not the phonological phoneme grapheme connections. So here's an example of a predictable text, and she is making soup, and you get to continue to build upon it. So we call it salt and carrot soup. We like it a lot. Then she has an apple and chops it up and stirs it, and now they call it the salt carrot apple soup. We like it a lot, and so there's a lot of predictability and a lot for the student to connect to, but not decode. So yes, this is predictable. This one, any guesses what this book is or this type of text? I won't read it aloud. I know we're getting long. This is leveled reading text. You may stop and read this yourself if you wish. This is a lot of information about instruments, but it is a leveled text. This does not have a lot of predictability, but it also isn't aligned to phonics instruction. So, what do you know about balanced literacy books? A lot of guided reading books are used. There's a level of leveling from Fontes and Pinnell, and there are often grade level goals aligned to it. And so if you are teaching kindergarten, you want your kindergartners to make sure that they're reading at least at level D or E at the end of the school year, and then it picks up and it moves forward all the way down to Z. So leveled books are built on strategic actions. They are a continuum of progress, and they are referred to as guided reading levels. Guided reading leveled books are used for small group instruction. The science of reading supports large group instruction and small group instruction, but the science of reading does not call their small group instruction guided reading. Guided reading is a coined term that really does reference balanced literacy. Sometimes leveled readers are predictable or a patterned text. So if you were to prepare a child for text reading, you might review the words, phrases, or sentences in the story. You might talk about, we're going to be reading a book that follows this phonics rule, and you're going to see lots of words that are like this, and so that you're going to refresh. And you might even talk to them about their high frequency words. You might talk to them about some words that are a level 2 word that we want to explicitly teach. And then while they're preparing for text reading, if they're looking at the pictures or they're looking at you, you always want to bring them to the letter sound relationships. And after the book has been read once, we want to make sure that they've read it multiple times. So we do a repeated reading. We might utilize an A-B partner. A reads it, then we read it together, and then B reads it. Or they might read it again as a class, but giving them multiple opportunities to read the text. So again, our authors, Jan and Carrie, really talk about decoding, that it might not be the skill that moves readers to the full alphabetic phase if it is not practiced as a tool for building a sight vocabulary. So sight words are known as words that are automatically peeled off the page, automatically read, and all words dream of being a sight word. But if the words, if the phonics skills are not practiced enough and there isn't automaticity or orthographic mapping, then it is just going to be a strategy for sounding out letters and words, and it is not going to be effective in moving a child to fluent reading. This is another decodable textbook that is filled, and opportunities for students to color the pictures, interact with the words, look at the short U sound in this particular one, and this book is actually published by Scholastic. All right, so you may or may not have access to decodable textbooks in the schools that you teach. I really can't emphasize how important it is to have decodable text so that students are able to read sentence strips, word lists, short passages, short stories. Depending on the grade level, we just want to make sure they have lots of practice. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to create a decodable text. And then I would like for you to analyze it. So on page 185 of our Teaching Reading Sourcebook, there is an activity called Bass Lake, and it is an analysis of 3 word types. I don't care for their word types. Wholly decodable words, to me, is just, they are decodable. They are what I would address as regular, and then mostly decodable. So there might be just one sound that doesn't follow the rule, And then there are the irregular words, or sometimes we call them heart words. Heart is kind of a play on words to mean hard or heart. We have to put extra heart, tender loving care to decoding them. And then to analyze and align your phonics lesson. So what I would like for you to do is, have you ever heard of Chat GPT? Well, I am going to ask you to utilize that. So if you don't have it, you might have to download the app or find another AI tool of your choice. But you're going to generate text aligned to your phonics skill. So whichever phonics skill you developed a lesson plan for, I would like for you to create text that is aligned to that phonics skill. And then I'm going to ask you to analyze the text, tell me the grade level, and think about an activity that you might do in addition to this text to make sure there's adequate practice for your students to read words practicing their phonics skill. I used GPT, and this is what my prompt was. Generate a simple, decodable text with R-controlled vowels, AR and ER, with high-frequency words featuring a car. So I wouldn't have had to say featuring a car because I did multiple of these, and one of the times I didn't specify AR and ER, and I got a story about a bird, which was actually pretty cute and could have been used with more the end of first grade or second grade. But GPT will generate a story for you, as it did for me, the fast car. This is not exactly what it generated. I actually added the word racetrack and turned car into race car, and I modified it slightly. But you can see the fast car is text that I could use with students after teaching ARER. And so in the park, there's a racetrack. We see a fast car. It's a race car. The race car can go far. It's red and has a star. Zoom, zoom, it's on par. The race car can dart near and far. It can speed in and out. I bet our cool car can cross the line. So I would definitely pre-teach the word near, and I might talk about compound words, and then I might talk about zoom, zoom as onomatopoeia and words that make the sound of their letters that go together, and we might refresh cool, ooh, and zoo, zoom, and then I would talk about the R-controlled vowels. I would use this for first grade, and when I looked through this, I saw that there were 53 total words. 49 of these were decodable, and I saw the 2 irregular words as the and there, and I thought that I would explicitly teach the word near, just because it has an R-controlled vowel and the so it's near. It's kind of a interesting word. So I would definitely do that, and I would probably even pre-teach, well, cool, we talked about a little bit. So an activity that I could have my students do is I could have them illustrate the text on a single sheet, or I could put it in a book format. I might even ask them to group the words by the R-controlled vowel, or I might ask them to write down what, words are, I guess I don't even know right now what the other word would be. See, you have to have an explicit lesson plan. But there are lots of activities that you could do. I guess I have it written here. You could make lists of words that have R-controlled vowels. You could have students illustrate the script or do an open or closed word sort. So those are just some ideas that you could do. I am going to ask you to do a lesson similar to what I just modeled on this slide. So how can decodable books support the work of phonics instruction? I hope you have a better understanding of that concept. The assignments for week 7 include 2 things. complete the KWLA, and then create and analyze a decodable text. Both of these are due October 8th, and all of this is in Blackboard. And the document that I have in Blackboard for create and analyze decodable text will guide everything that needs to be done. It is more extensive than what I modeled, but it is as thorough as what is in our teaching reading source book. I hope that you have learned a little bit more about text selection. I again want to thank the authors of Jan and Carrie for really helping me have a better understanding. I know that their idea in Shift 6 is to also use some of those leveled books, and then you could use AI to reword them, type up the AI prompts, and peel and paste them in the books. And now you might just be making new decodable books with artificial intelligence, and students could possibly take them home afterwards. So just an idea that these authors came up with. So have an awesome week and reach out if you have any questions.